is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Red Rising Saga, Book 2, Golden Sun. Chapters... Where are we now? Sorry, guys, I'm trying to find my spot here. Chapters 43 through 48. I incorrectly stated that this was going to be the final episode last week. I was incorrect on that. The Sea, the Poet, Gifts, Brotherhood, Free, and the Magistrate. In this episode, we're going to talk about Danner's returning to Mars, specifically to his home. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashley for commissioning this episode. I just want to mention that I'm seeing in the spreadsheet that there were some episodes that should have been attributed as the Howlers having commissioned it. And usually I read from the calendar, or from the event, and the event on my calendar always lists the name of the person who commissioned it. And I really should check the spreadsheet. Really, I should. I'm not in the habit of it, but I should get better about that because it's going to have the more accurate information. So apologies out there to the Howlers who contributed to episodes and didn't get the credit. I just really feel bad about that. And I hope you understand. No hard feelings, hopefully. But anyway, okay. So these chapters are so packed. I'm really going to have to pace myself here. So first thing we start off with is Danner waking up next to Mustang, who is asleep beside him in bed. But when she wakes, it's kind of suggested that she doesn't really remember having gotten in bed with him. It's like she did it just because she was so tired and this was a bed right here. And she didn't really think through what it would be like to wake up beside him. And so when he wakes, he's been mostly healed up from skin grafts and stuff, and she is still passed out, and so he has some time to think about things by himself for a little while. And he's just having some trouble coming to grips with how many people have died, how many people he feels responsible for directly, and is thinking about when he was a child and the sound that woke him up every morning, and how there were lots of sounds that were sort of homey, reminding him of his parents, but the actual thing that woke him was the dread of a closing door. And basically it was like, I didn't want my father to have to go out there again. The fact that every day he had to get up and go out and close the door behind him and we just have to hope he would fucking come home again. That was the thing that woke me up every day. And that is pretty awful. I have never had a parent that was knowingly in, what I say knowingly, that I understood was in a business that could kill them. My father was a coke dealer, so he was definitely in a business that could have killed him and very nearly did, but I didn't know it at the time. So I was just completely oblivious to all of this. And the knowledge of it every single day, that would be tough to live with. So she finally wakes up and he asks, who did we lose? And she names them. And it's just a lot of people. The Sovereign has apparently escaped, but Fitchner wounded her pretty badly. And her father's alive. It says, when the shields fell, several Golds already inside the Citadel led a lurcher squad to rescue him. Turns out my brother has a long reach, so when the Olympic Knights came to take him with Octavia, they left empty-handed. The HC channels are calling Roke Nelson Reincarnate. he captured more than 80% of the Bologna fleet, which means, as leader of the engagement, he has claim to at least 30% of the ships. And there's, a little back and forth about whether or not they need to worry about Roke's loyalty. And I have to confess, I was surprised at how cavalier he is about it. I know that probably he's right. He probably is. He's probably right. But I have just been so leery of Roke this whole book. And I don't want him to be suspicious of Roke. Not really. The fact that he believes in him so much is kind of part of what is holding their relationship together. But it almost felt like he was taking it for granted, So at this point, Mustang is like, look, I'm going to be in charge of all of the political information you get, because you have done these meetings with my brother. You still are you're saying I don't trust him, but you're throwing in with him. You have got to not with that anymore. You just cannot trust him. And I appreciate her saying you don't need him anymore. You have me, but I'm not totally sure she's right that he doesn't need the jackal anymore. I don't know. And let's see. Severo is fine. Oh, right. And Lorne is with Victra. And it turns out that it says Lorne's taken Victra under his wing. Seems he's comfortable allying his family with the Julii. Victra's mother has agreed to the pact. Like a marriage pact? Taking her under his wing usually means in a, protege mentor kind of way. But the way that this was written, it felt like we were talking about a marriage. And I was given to understand that Victra is a third his age. Which, not to say that is unheard of at all. But I wouldn't have thought Victra would be down with that. I really wouldn't. So Cassie says, I have to confess, I wonder how one would suddenly account for the expenses of maintaining a fleet. I guess this is my assumption, and this is really not a great assumption. Just, I recognize that there are holes in this, but my assumption was, if you are able to take over a fleet in this way, that there are probably dealings that were happening that you could continue on with if you still have a chokehold on the supplies or the transportation or whatever, that you could sort of just be all right, now you're dealing with us, and you could keep making your money the way that the people who had originally owned the fleet made their money, because now you're the only people that the customer can deal with anymore, But that's presuming a lot about what the fleet does, what kind of business is involved, if any. There's a lot of assumptions being made. So I don't really stand by that as much as I'm just saying what I kind of assumed subconsciously and did not really investigate at all. So at this point, she says that Mars is almost entirely united under her family, and that they are trying for a summit, and that they may actually manage to take Mars, and that would really deal a blow against Octavia and make it so that they've got a real fighting chance of taking her down. And she says, it's a civil war and not a pointless one. Father is making talk of giving the reformers a chance at the table. This means something. And Darrow is like, you believe him? And she's like, I do. For the first time in a long time, I really do. Darrow doesn't. And I have to agree with him. I really can't help but think at this point, he is aware, like this is how my mind is working. The only reason that Augustus has sort of gotten out of the situation he was in was because of Darrow. And despite the fact that Darrow says, I'm not a Democrat, in that little one-on-one they had, he gave razors to Obsidians, which is really, really significant, and I have to assume would get back to Augustus. It just has to have gotten back. Like, I really think so. And I can't help but think Augustus is now in a position where he knows that despite what Darrow may have said, his behavior points to a different belief altogether. And that maybe in order to keep Darrow on his side, and Darrow is basically the MVP in the game at the moment, he has got to make it seem like he's on board for now. This is what I'm going with, is like, he's doing what he needs to do to keep Darrow happy. And to keep Darrow happy, he has to keep Mustang happy. Like, the whole thing, I think, is just game playing until such time as he has accumulated the power to do what the fuck he wants, which is not going to be reforming anything. So then they talk about Cassius and whether he's alive or not. And it seems like his entire family, except for his mom, seems to be dead. And she's asking Darrow, like, if he regrets taking his arm, you know, and whether or not he regrets that Cassius is even still alive. And he doesn't really know how to answer. And he just says, I want to hate him. Like, I think about him and it makes me want to fucking crush things. But I really just, I can't hate him. She says it's hard to keep hate going. And really, that's kind of the thing, like, people talk about having the strength to forgive and stuff like that. And just letting things go. And in a lot of cases, I won't take that well. Because I feel like that sort of language can often be used to diminish what somebody experienced and to almost shame a victim by acting like if you were more pure of heart or generous, you would have let this go by now. But I will admit, I am not somebody who holds on to grudges that much, sheerly because it takes too much energy. There's like one or two grudges that I still hold to this day, and I will never let go of, because the person not only didn't make it right, but continues to operate in the same spheres as me in a lot of places. And so I am exposed to their bullshit a lot. And I see their name, even though they're blocked on Facebook and stuff, I'll see their name because somebody is replying to a comment of theirs and just be reminded, oh, of course, they're in this fucking group. So I tend to be able to sustain a grudge when it's like made clear that the person doing harm, that did harm to me, is still out here doing it. And that's a whole different thing. If it's just somebody like did me wrong and they're out in the world just like living a regular life after that, but they had done me wrong in the past, I just don't have it in me to just keep it. It's too much energy. It really, really is. So finally, he says, when I was on the bottom of the river, I knew I wouldn't see you again. And she tries to turn it into a joke and be like, you don't have my permission to die. But he starts crying and she's really taken aback by it. And she holds him and tries to tell him it's over and it's that they're safe now. But he knows that's like just so far from the truth. And he can't stop. He just keeps crying, like absolutely devastated. He describes it as can't catch my breath, heart thundering, hand shaking. And that kind of like, this is one of those things that I feel is so difficult in the moment of when you're reading to really grasp the intensity Because if you're watching a show and somebody completely breaks down like this, it just hits different than simply reading it does, you know? And I feel like this is a paragraph that could easily get lost because it's somewhat short. But I really like seeing Darrow feeling the weight of everything and getting to a point where it is a struggle to keep this up. Because I really, like, I have a much greater appreciation as an adult for that aspect of a story. I used to, as a younger person, a lot of us, I think, were like this. I used to get a little bit frustrated with the main character that seemed to react so emotionally all the time, because it was hard for me to understand that I'm not reading a very one-dimensional, like, children's book. At times I'm just like, you're the hero, get on with it, you know? And I have just really grown to appreciate seeing a character having to cope with things. And I think that it's a little bit harder to connect with in a book than it is for me to watch, because seeing somebody having a panic attack feels so much more visceral and immediate than trying to read and translate these emotions. Because that's the thing, is like the nature of how a panic attack feels. You can't sort the words out in your head. So the author has to write something that is cohesive and makes sense on the page to paint a picture, but that is at odds with what it feels like to experience that thing. And there are times where somebody writes it in a very disjointed, and that I think can be very, very effective. But this is just, you know, this is a really straightforward description of what is happening. And I just wanted to explain, like, that it's something that I appreciate seeing, but I have to sort of stop and, like, really let it sink in to appreciate what it is that's happening with Darrow here. So anyway, eventually he calms down and she starts to, like, reach for him, and he begins to push her hands away, but she pushes back and says, "Let me in." And eventually, by the end of this, they're having sex, and he's realizing, like, he feels like he's betraying Io on the one hand, but on the other hand, he's like, the last line is, "What is the bloody damn point of surviving in this cold world if I run from the only warmth it has to offer?" Which I know that's meant to be about, like, the warmth and happiness of love, but it definitely felt like a different kind of warmth that he was talking about from a very specific place due to the context of the scene. And I couldn't help but snicker like a 12-year-old. I'm so sorry. I know that is, like, at odds with what the whole point of that final sentence was. I see that many people have underlined it and are seeing it as a profound, and it is, but because of what's happening, it just really felt like something specific. So anyway, we're going on to chapter 44, The Poet. They have gone to find Roke, and there's this, like, little scene where they're standing outside listening to the conversation that's happening between Pebble, Daxo, Roke, Thistle. I'm trying to see who else is here. Clown. Severo is not here, though. And it's pretty stupid. Like, Roke is telling a joke because they've said that he can't be funny because he's too scholastic. And he tells a story about who's the first carpenter. And when they just say, like, fine, just tell us, he says, Eve, because she made Adam's banana stand. Oh man, that is really terrible. I love that they all groan, and there's like this moment of, I hate this joke. And then delayed comes Daxo cracking up. Like, he got it, but it just took him like an extra 2 seconds. And this is always really, really funny for me, you guys, because right now I'm rewatching The Circle, the reality competition show on Netflix. I highly recommend it. It's a bizarrely wholesome show for what it is. And I guarantee, like, when you meet every contestant at first, you're going to be like, this person is so annoying. But a lot of them just grow on you to the point that you're like, how did I ever not like this person? They are fantastic. And there is a dude on this season named Marvin, and he is beautiful, just gorgeous. I think he's Nigerian, and he has like 3 degrees in chemical engineering and microbiology and something, like, smart dude, you would think. But he is the biggest himbo you've ever met in your life. Unbelievable how goofy and just like not knowledgeable about certain things this man is. And there is a point where somebody tells a joke in a chat, and the way it's edited, I'm sure, makes it look worse. But you see everybody like immediately reacting, and then you see him separate in his apartment looking at the screen, seeing this chat, and this long pause as he puzzles it out. And then finally he starts laughing hysterically, and it's just exactly like this scene where everybody else is just like, oh God, that is a bad joke. But he thinks it's hilarious once he's given the time to like get it. And now I am imagining Daxo as Marvin. Like, that's who I've got in my head, which is not terrible casting because Marvin is huge. He's got to be at least 6.5 feet tall and is pure muscle. So yeah, that's who Daxo is now for me. Anyway, so this is when Clown is like, oh, I smell a suicidal madman. And it turns out that they like know he is hiding in the hallway. So Darrow and Mustang come in, and he eats a huge breakfast and just kind of plays it casual. But finally he goes and catches up with Roke. And they have this conversation, and it was sort of, I don't know, you guys. I was surprised because, like, I thought Quinn was going to play more of a role in the convo, and she doesn't, which I'm grateful for because I don't really like him holding Darrow, like, Quinn against him. But the way that this comes, he says, I want to apologize. Since the academy, I've kept you at arm's length and taken you for granted. I shouldn't have done that, not when you've always been so kind to me. I didn't mind that it was always about you, Darrow. That was what burned Tactus, but not me. I'm not in love with you like Mustang, and I don't worship you like Severo or the Howlers. I was a true friend. I was someone who saw your light and your dark and accepted both without judgment, without agenda. And what did you do to me? You used me like a man uses a horse. I'm better than that. Quinn was better than that. I'm really, like, look, I'm not trying to say that Darrow is not doing that to some people. And of course, Roke doesn't understand the full implications. He doesn't know what happened, really, to make Darrow drug him the way that he did. But is he talking about specifically being brought to this planet without being told that the Sovereign is here? Or is, like, what specifically is he referencing here? Because there's a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I feel like he's playing it like he didn't have agency, and he made a lot of the choices with the information that Darrow could share. I'm not saying that this latest thing wasn't a real shitty move, because I think it was. But I don't know that that's specifically what he's talking about here. And he does here say, I'm better than that, Quinn was better than that. And, like, did he use Quinn? I don't really understand that there either. Quinn was given the same information as everybody else who agreed to participate in the thing. She knew it was dangerous. She chose to be a howler. Well, was she technically a howler? She was, though, wasn't she? She was a howler. But anyway, I just really felt like being kept at arm's length and taken for granted is one thing. Being used is different. And I don't know that his accusation here feels correct. And Darrow says, "Are you better than this friendship?" And he says, "I think I'm better than you. I've sat the bedsides of 3 friends this year, and I knew every time that I would have switched places. But would you have done it?" And Darrow says, "I'd give my life to bring them back, I say, knowing it is a lie." And I appreciate that he at least can just say it straight out. I'm fucking lying right now. But I don't blame him for it. What else are you going to say in this situation? He turns from the deer to watch me, eyes warm and sad and carrying so much more weight than they ever should. He's different from me, from Cassius. We called him brother, and he was one better than either of us deserved. And he asks here, do you ever wonder why I'm in Mars? And before he gets a chance to share about this, Severo comes and interrupts. And it's just so frustrating how every time he tries to talk to Roke, part of me is like, is somebody doing this on purpose, trying to drive a wedge between them, you know? But Roke seems to say that, I get it, we're going to have to have more than one conversation. So just go ahead, and it's not like this is the only chance you're going to have. We'll talk again. So Severo says, "It's Ares, your friends. The red, the pink, and the violet have gotten themselves captured by the jackal." So he says by the jackal, and I'm already in this wait, does he know? I'm really worried, thinking that Darrow has been, his spot is about to be blown up. And then we jump to 45, and his ship is landing, and it turns out he's going to go and see the jackal. And so I got really confused about what was happening here. What it turns out is going on, these guys were captured because they're associated with Ares, and the jackal has made it his personal mission to deal with these guys. So he has them in, and it's a totally separate issue from what's going on with Darrow right now, as far as the jackal knows. More on that later. Anyway, so he lands. The Greys notify me they have orders to search my ship. Let the mice search the ship, Ragnar. They're looking for... The Greys spare a glance at Ragnar. Swallows. Bombs, Dominus. So they go inside, and he's with Victra, who's escorting him in. Just flirting with him, grabs his ass when she says hi to him. She's very sexual assaulty, but I guess we're just gonna be cute about it. I don't know. And I love this fucking room the jackal's in. Walls and floor are glass. Fire swirls under the floor, licking up in columns near the window. Several minimalist chairs of steel and leather sit on fur rugs. The jackal is hunched over a holo display, speaking quickly to someone. He motions to us to take a seat. On the holo, I glimpse Harmony in a dark room surrounded by greys. One is hunched over her, doing something with some device I can't quite see. The jackal finishes, giving a data strip to Sunhua before she leaves. He joins us, rubbing the back of his neck. So, pretty grim. I appreciate that we don't actually hear screaming or anything like that. This room, it's so funny. It just sounds like he's holed up in if you guys have seen any of the prequels of Star Wars, I think the one that I'm imagining in my head comes from Rogue One. I'm trying to remember. Could it? I think it is, because Vader's already a thing in Rogue One, but he has like basically a living room that's inside a volcano. And that's what this is reminding me of. So the whole way that this like attitude is with Darrow just being like, oh, hey man, just came to give you some presents. I was so confused, you guys. I genuinely was not getting what was going on. Like, I feel very silly for not having gotten it, but I'm going to be honest with you all about how taken aback I was at the approach that they took. And it makes total sense, and it's a smart, good plan, but it really, I was having to like get it explained to me like I was a 5-year-old, you know, like it felt like nothing slid into place until practically after it's all over and done with already. So I just felt very, very silly. So I accept a cup of tea from a pink. A small spread of breakfast is placed in front of me. I'm 7 hours behind this time zone, but I can't let on how nervous I am. And he basically agrees with the Jackal that he has to do some sort of like appearance for the press, even though he doesn't want to. He says, fine, we'll do it today. And it says, I wanted a moment of peace, but they joined me in looking at the falling snow and the distant city beneath. So eventually he brings forward these 2 boxes. Ragnar carries them in. And I really appreciate how this is all set up, because he makes it so that Ragnar is asked to leave the room. He asks him to leave, but it's in response to Victor, it seems like, when I think it's pretty clear he had to make sure Ragnar wasn't in the rooms for this whole attack later to seem at all like it was possible that anybody could get one over on him. And I really love this. He gives Victra a bottle of petrichor. The room fills with the smell of stone before rain. Petrichor is the earthy scent produced when rain falls on dry soil. The word is constructed from the ancient Greek for rock and stone, and ichor, the ethereal fluid that is the blood of the gods in Greek mythology. I had no idea. That is wild. And I want some. I'm going to be real with you. That sounds like a lovely scent. She is very moved by this and comes over and kisses Darrow on the mouth. And he's like, I would have preferred the cheek. And I'm just like, yeah, but when has she cared about consent from you, buddy? I don't know. Then the Jackal unwraps his box, and he just stops, and it says he is quiet for a long moment. Darrow, you shouldn't. And then they get interrupted. So we don't find out what he gave the Jackal. And I am fucking dying to know. The silence, that's the part that makes me kind of feel like whatever the Jackal's response was about to be was really measured. He needed to buy himself a second to decide how to respond. And I don't know what that means. Like, yeah, no idea. So now is the attack. I'm going to kind of jump through this a little bit, but eventually it's Darrow's guys, of course. Severo is one of the ones that's attacking here. And the Jackal is so disgusted. He gets up and leans his head against the door. Then he rears back and slams it into the metal again, till blood pours down his face. I have to pull him away before he splits his skull. He laughs darkly for a moment before shaking himself. Twice, he sneers. Twice they violate me. I was breaking them another day, maybe 2, and they would have cracked. And they have to push him and be like, who? And he finally tells them about the people that he has imprisoned. And Victor's like, you had captured Sons of Ares here and you didn't fucking say anything about it? Are you kidding me? And he's like, well, I wasn't going to tell you until I knew who Ares was. And they both do a whole like song and dance. I don't know how in this Victor is. Like if she's been let in. I think she hasn't been. But Darrow has to pray. He has to play like he's really infuriated and a little bit hurt and offended that he wasn't trusted with this. Here's my issue. So I am not sure that they got one over on the Jackal like they think. This felt easy. This just felt easy. I don't know if I am being paranoid. There is something about the combination of Severo, like, I don't want to say giving these people up, but it just feels like their recapture was not difficult enough. And the fact that Augustus is talking about how he'll have, like, let reformers come to the table, that has me really uneasy. I'm starting to be like, is Darrow being set up? Have they started to sort of suspect something with him? Did they hear something? Like, it feels like they have an inkling and they're laying groundwork to see how he reacts, and that he might be giving himself away. And I don't know, you guys. It's just this feeling, you know? The Jackal is just smarter than I want him to be a lot of the time. He isn't like a supervillain or anything. Like, he kind of is, but you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have that absolutely unbelievable level of intelligence that some book villains have. So I'm not trying to say that he just sees through everything, but there is something here that we know he's a really good actor that rings false. And it may just be my fears for Darrow and that's it. But I just got suspicions here, man. I just do. So they eventually are like, well, who has been in the room? You know, and he comes to the conclusion that it was Sun Hua. Her men are dead and she's gone like the wind. And we find out that they like framed Sun Hua by putting money in her accounts. But it says only thing is Sun Hua is loyal as a dog and dead as a doornail in the cargo hold, which is so sad to me. I just always feel bad for people who are murdered for their loyalty to somebody else when they don't really have necessarily evil designs. It's just that they were doing the job they were hired to do. You know, like, it's just not their fault. And there's a lot of Greys that die in this like fake attack, and they are simply collateral damage to get the effect right. Like, the amount of lives that have to be spent to make all of this look right, and the way that they are hand waved, is really disturbing at times. So 46, he meets up with Dancer, and it's so great. So it turns out Harmony did like straight up lie. And because you guys know, I was sort of wondering whether or not at the time the story she was telling was true. But I don't think that I ever theorized that she had been trying to kill Dancer. I think I was like, maybe Dancer's still alive out there somewhere. But I don't feel like I ever laid it down as like, I am thinking she, you know, like it doesn't matter. I'm just, so this whole thing with Harmony and the fact that I guess she's been rescued as well, I don't know what is going to happen with her. I'm really curious about it because she was one of the people that he had, right? Harmony is the one that Darrow saw on the little screen. I'm trying to go back. Yeah. Surrounded by Greys. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. We have this, like, Dancer apologizes for the fact that, like, I really wanted to reach you. I'm really sorry that we had to, like, sort of let you go with the wrong information. And Darrow's like, look, I get it, but don't let it happen again. And eventually, Fitchner comes in because he doesn't want to tell Fitchner's story. And this was what had been alluded to. I can't remember if it was Cassie who said, but last week I had thought that Fitchner was a red that had been carved. But it turns out he's a gold who fell in love with a red. And so he's actually a gold that's like in charge of this whole movement, but isn't. And that makes some sense. Like, I really thought that he was going to be a red, but when you think about the resources that you would need to get things going on the scale that the Sons of Ares is moving in at this point, it really makes sense that you would have to have the money that a gold would have. Like, how else are you going to get this set up, you know? But it turns out that the reason that Severo kind of looks weird the way that he does is because he's half a red and half a gold, because Fitchner fell in love with this woman and they went to a carver in order to have a biological child that was both of theirs. And it's always really fascinating to me in this sort of distant way when this is part of a story, because I have just so never felt the urge to have children, that the idea that I would want them so much and that it would matter to me so much that they be biologically related to both me and my partner is utterly alien. Like, it's just, I really do not get why it matters. If you want to raise a child together, who cares about its blood? Like, just raise the child, find one, you know, it just doesn't matter. But it does to some, and I know it does to people. I know that this is like a thing, but I am just somebody for whom it really wouldn't make a difference if I'm raising a kid that's my own blood or raising a kid that I have decided to take care of, like, in a totally different way than getting knocked up. I feel like I would just feel the same sense of, like, love and obligation and responsibility in either case. And it may just be that I think that because I've never given birth to a child, and maybe I wouldn't really feel that way. But it's hard for me to understand wanting that so much that you would be willing to risk what they risk in order to accomplish it. So let's see. Oh yeah. The first gold's been with us since the first ancestors. Oh no, sorry. The bloody hell. The first gold, the one with normal eyes and gold uniforms, took most of the early recruits from the poor bastards from the Irish Isles after the radiation from London turned the Isles into a wasteland. The golds took the highly skilled migratory workforce and recruited them to be the first pioneers. Their slang just stuck around, jumbled up a bit. And there's a whole thing later where they discuss how, like, family is more important for reds than any other color. And it's just such a kind of questionable thing. Like, I can't tell whether it's not said in the sentence, but I can't tell whether that was supposed to be like, we bred them that way, we instilled that in them on purpose, or if it's supposed to just be like an innate quality. But I felt like the fact that we're basing the reds on a real population that exists today and then saying something like that, I was like, you just want to watch that, but I don't know. You're walking a very tightrope. So finally, Mickey comes in. You guys, poor Mickey. He is wrecked. He just falls into Darrow's arms, kisses him like desperately, and begins sobbing and saying thank you over and over again. And Darrow is like, these grays fucked him up. Like, he's half mad, it feels like. And he says, I tried to warn you, but I was afraid you wouldn't believe me over Harmony. And he says, I would have believed you. And he says, you would have? And there was just something about, like, asking, like, really? You know, when you are in a position where you are treated the way he was being treated. Hearing that anybody would give credibility to something you would say can be so comforting. Just knowing that you would be taken seriously. And he says that she said I was a slaver, but he admits, like, she was not wrong about that. I did really fucked up things. Even when I liked them, I would hurt them. And it's like, why would you even help me, considering what a piece of shit I am? And Darrow says, because you're my friend. Weird as you are, wicked as you were, I know you want to be better. And he calls Darrow his prince before he leaves, and it's like a whole thing. So we get the story of Fitchner and his wife, and then eventually the carver is caught, and he turns the two of them in exchange for a reduced sentence, which is just, it's very easy to be like, how dare somebody snitch? But if they're offering you like 10 years off a prison sentence in exchange for a couple of names, I think a lot of us would probably have a hard time deciding what to do there. And they find his wife and take her in for questioning. But he was away with Severo. So Severo was safe, and apparently they didn't know Fitchner's name. So they found her, but apparently the trail was not there to track him down. They disposed of her. It says so right in the records, disposed. Gassed her with Ackless 9, put her in an oven, pumped her ash into the sea. They didn't even give her a name, just a number. Not because she was a thief or a murderer or who had violated any man's or woman's rights, but because she was a red who dared to love a gold. My selfish love killed her. It wasn't like your wife, Darrow. I didn't watch mine die. I didn't see golds come into my world and ruin it. Instead, I felt the coldness of the system, swallowing the only thing I lived for. A copper pressing buttons, filling out a spreadsheet, a brown twisting a knob to release gas. They killed my wife. But they won't ever think so. She's not a memory in their mind. She's a statistic. It's as if she never existed. Some ghost I loved, but no one else ever saw. That's what society does. Spread the blame so there's no villain. So it's futile to even begin to find a villain, to find justice. It's just machinery, processes, and it rumbles on, inexorable, till a whole generation rises that will throw themselves on the gears. And I really liked that speech because that is a thing, where it can feel so overwhelming that the entire system is set up to oppress and discriminate certain groups of people, that it's like you just don't even know where to start with fighting back against it. It really can just be, it feels like, how do you find the end of the thread of this on this giant spool, And when Darrow asks what her name was, he's real weird and doesn't want to say, and Severo tells her. So you're half red, I say to Severo. Severo nods. Found out a couple days ago. Weird as shit, righto? Weird as shit. You'll make a good ruster. I like to think I'm an endangered species. So yeah, I just like this conversation. Finding out that Severo looks the way he does for a reason, like you guys know. I had my weird suspicions about both Fitchner and Severo, but I couldn't get it to make sense. And I just felt like their appearance meant something. And it turns out, like, Fitchner's appearance doesn't really mean anything. Like, it's part of how he was treated, being a bronze, basically, but he isn't altered. That's just the way he looks. And Severo, there is like a very specific thing going on there. So they tell him directly that the plan is okay, look, Augustus wants to adopt you. And Severo's kind of like, yeah, I kind of figured. He wants to tie me to his family. Like, I'm a rising star, and he wants to secure me, and he probably would like it if I married Mustang, so that I was, like, part of the family in that capacity as well. And then he's like, the thing is that I have this alliance with the Jackal, and if he sees me as a threat because his father is making me heir, that's going to be a problem. And Severo is like, are you sure? Because it really feels like he's out here doing his own whole thing with his media empire, and he has pretty much let go of the idea that he's ever going to get his father's approval and be seen as the heir again. And I feel like, while it does look that way, there's just a principle to the thing. I don't know how much that matters to somebody like the Jackal, because he is such an unusual person with unusual motivations. I don't know whether to judge him according to what another regular human being would react like, but I can't help but feel, even if you have let go of ever getting approval, when you see somebody else stepping into the spot that should have been yours and getting it, that's just going to hit a certain way that it might be difficult, you know? I don't know. So finally, they're like, well, whatever you need to do, you're going to get adopted, and he is going to defeat the Sovereign, and he'll want to be sovereign himself. You know he will. He isn't just going to be king of Mars. So you're going to help him become sovereign, and then a year after that, Severo will kill him. And all of a sudden, he's realizing, like, you want me to be the sovereign, like to inherit it? And they're like, yep, you're going to be the strongest one available, the one that everybody is looking to. It's just a completely natural response. And the whole thing is a cheat anyway, but we're going to help you cheat instead of everybody else getting the advantage this time. We'll make sure you have information. We'll guard you and make sure that nobody can get at you. We're going to have a whole network of spies. Everything is going to be known to us. And Darrow is like, I really thought that we were toward the end of this and that we could just openly declare war soon. And they're like, sorry, bro, but no, nowhere near that point. You know we're not. And he's like, yeah, I do know that. So he finally says, look, I can agree to this, but I have got to be let in on things. You can't just leave me alone in the dark the way that I was. And Severo says, say yes, Fitchner, or I'm not going either. There's something about the fact that he calls him Fitchner that I find really funny. And Fitchner says, every day, if we have to, whatever we need to do. And you'll have people all over the place that you can trust. You won't be alone. And Darrow then says, I have to go back. And at first they think he means like, you know, back to Mustang and everybody. And he's like, no. I have to go back, like home. And they realize he wants Eo's blessing. Which eventually, when he gets to the place where she had been buried, it's clear this was like kind of a pointless exercise. But we'll get there in a second. So I love this so much. I'm taking her to Lycos. Her? Dancer asks. Mustang. Severo murmurs. No, Fitchner almost yells. Absolutely not. No. It's not worth the risk. You're set up now. She's in love with you. Don't lose that leverage because of a guilty conscience. And what if I love her too? Shit, Fitchner curses. Shit. You're serious? I thought this was part of your gory damn game. Shit, boyo, you'll ruin everything. Gory damn idiot. Shit. And he says, this is everything. She loves me. I won't use her anymore. I won't leverage her. If I can't trust her, gold can't change. And Titus and Harmony were right. Hell, the society is right. You and I know that it's not about our color, it's about our hearts. So let's put that shit to the test. And when Fitchner says, what if she just rejects you? Severo says, then I'll put a bullet in her head. And I wonder if he means it. I think he thinks he means it. I believe him when he says it. He intends it. But like, in the moment, would he? That loyalty to Darrow and how he knows Darrow wouldn't want him to do it. I don't know, man. I don't know. So then we go to 47 when he finally goes back to Mars. And it's great. I love this so much. Anytime that you've got a story where a character goes a really long way and then returns to where they began, it's fascinating to read. And the Cradle series that I really love by Will White, which I was commissioned to cover, that series has a point way later. I can't remember how many books there are. I think there are 12. And in book like 8 or 9, I think, the main character eventually like returns home. And it's really brutal. It's like, it's so well done. And it's tough at times, you know, but it's fun to see an author do this and the way that they show how a person has grown. And in some ways, you know, they will have grown, like, very light spoilers for Cradle. But the main character sees how, like, it, sort of amateurish a lot of what he really respected actually is. Yet, within him, there is still this deep, deep longing for approval from his family. That despite all of this other growth that allows him to see things clearly, he still isn't able to satisfy. And Darrow doesn't really have that here in the same way, but it's a sort of similar, like, experience. Because, first of all, he goes looking for Ugly Dan, who was the one who, like, took Io. And Darrow is expecting this guy to look like a fucking demon. And instead, he's just really sad. He's, like, not the monster. And Darrow is realizing, like, I must have been really fucking weak at one point for a guy who is this pitiful to have genuinely intimidated me. Like, this, just seeing him now, it's almost worse having come back and seeing this. Like, yikes. So, he goes up to the bubble garden and he looks around, and again, he lived underground, never saw the sun. This place was like an Eden. But now he has been to some of the most beautiful places these planets have to offer. And so this spot is just kind of trashy. And this is like what happens when you grow and you move away and then you come to your hometown again. Some things are quaint and lovely and you're like, oh, this is really great to come back to. And I remember why I love it. And then there are things that don't hold up at all. And it's hard to know, the way it is for him here, whether or not it's because your memory is flawed or if it's because the place has actually genuinely changed since you were there last. And sometimes it's both and sometimes it's one or the other, but it can be really, really tricky. And I've had this experience as well. And it's always such a strange sensation of just being like, I could have sworn this place was like twice the size of this and that it was like nice. And this is kind of dingy and shitty, you know? And he's even wondering, like, I imagine Io as being this perfect woman, but maybe if I met her today, I wouldn't even notice her, like, you know, and that's a really weird feeling as well. So he sits and he waits for the sun to rise. I laugh at myself. Ragnar slips from his place at the door. Or waits for the sun to set, sorry. She'd laugh at me for coming in here. Laughter is a gift. Sometimes. I stand and dust my pants, giving the place one last look. The garden isn't as perfect as it was in my memory, and neither was she. She was impatient. She could be spiteful for small reasons. But she was a girl, not even 17. And she gave the most she could, did the best she could with what she had. That's why I will always love her. And it is why I know whether or not she would give me her blessing. And it is why I know whether or not she would give her blessing for what I go to do. My heart can't stay here in this cage she herself has fled. It must move on. I am out of time here, but the magistrate chapter is a pretty easy one to get through. So I am just going to go ahead and summarize this pretty quickly. I'm sorry, I see Michael in the chat saying, speaking of Cradle, have you ever considered covering that with Rashawn? Michael, there is a whole story behind considering and actually announcing that I was going to do it. And then Will White posting that he was playing the recent Harry Potter game that dropped and like refusing to take a stand about trans rights. And I just withdrew from covering it. If he ever makes a statement and actually like has some balls about it, then maybe I will reconsider. But at this point, he just disappointed me so profoundly that I decided I would rather cover something else. So it's balls in his court as far as I'm concerned with that. But okay, so the magistrate. His name is Timony Podginus. I swear to God, you guys, the names. Oh my God. And he is like not sure why Darrow is here and is trying to like be super obsequious, but also like asking questions, and Darrow is not interested in telling him anything, and also sees this guy as also extremely pitiful. And it's very clear this guy is like, you know, taking a little off the top of everything. Like there's rampant corruption here. And he's talking about like this beautiful place that he has been and how this like bubble garden reminds him of, and he is name dropping all of these spots. And it really reminds me of like a character in Frasier who's just like, yes, last week when I was at Cigar Volant and I was drinking one of the 45 Chateauneuf de Pops, you know, like, sir, you've got to stop. Okay. Nobody cares. And he says, you're right. It is impossible to find refined company in a place like this. My eyes fall so heavily on him. I fear he might burst out crying. And then he says, I wanted them to be terrible, hideous monsters, but they aren't. They are petty men who ruin lives and don't even notice. How many others are there like them? That is a fucking bar. Like, that's everyday life. And we all are capable of this sort of thing. If it's out of sight, it's out of mind. How many of us do things that we know are like affecting somebody and we just do them because that's we don't feel like we have a lot of options. And like, how do the ripples, and to some degree, maybe we don't have a lot of options, but like the everyday quality, the banality of evil, you know, it's just very effective. So eventually, you know, Darrow has to get to the point. He has Ragnar come out. Your output of helium-3 has decreased by 14% over the last quarter. Your projections show an expected shortfall of 13,500 kilos for the current fiscal quarter. Praetor Andromedus wishes you to explain. And the whole way that this goes down is just agonizing because this guy is trying to make excuses when it's perfectly clear that he is corrupt and that this whole thing is like, you know, not being held together well on purpose. But then he tries to be, he gets a little bit in Ragnar's face because, as far as he's concerned, an obsidian is below him. And then he starts talking about the way that things have been going since this is the mine where all of the rebellion stuff has sort of originated. And he starts talking about how he has handled it. I've docked their rations, cracked down on enforcement of legal violations, discredited leading thought makers by luring them into liaisons of homosexuality. I have even introduced the recommended scenarios from On Diffusing Rebellion. Over the past 6 years, I've introduced plague and cure, rebellion and suppression, natural disaster, pit viper migration, and even considered the extraplanetary government upheaval package. No man would have done better than I. And just like the way he's described, it's just so depressing. It's just so depressing because there genuinely is a playbook. It just, and finally Darrow is like, look, I know you're trying to justify why you should stay in charge. I need you to stop worrying about that. That's not what's at question here. I am considering quarantining it though. And he says your populace has failed to respond favorably to any of your methods. Why shouldn't we just get rid of them and then replace them with people who are more compliant? My liege, don't do it. Tears sparkle in his greedy, panicked eyes. My mine's profits may have decreased, but it's still viable, still functional. The Reds here are good miners, the best in all the world. That's why they're wild, but they've calmed. I've increased their rations of alcohol and increased pheromone circulation. They're breeding like rabbits. I've also had my gamma plants tamper with their machinery and maps. They think the mines are drying up. They'll walk on pins and needles, fearing they won't make quota. Then we'll fix the machines, and they'll be filled with fresh purpose. I can't even tell them that terraforming is complete and migration will begin in 10 years. There are still so many options before we must accede to quarantine. I watch the man as he sputters to an end, slumping down, lifeless as a wet shirt on a hanger. Is this all for his own vanity, or does he really care for the Reds? This was a test to see, now I can't tell. He might actually care in some strange way. Another monster from my past made human by society's lash. And Darrow is like, you know what? We're going to say it's safe. And I want you to fucking throw a feast and give them tons of food and drink. And he's like, why? And he's like, because I fucking said. How about you don't ask questions? So then we go to Darrow like watching from afar all of these people that he knows personally. And they're partying. And a part of him wants this to be lovely to see, but he's realizing just how grim things are. Like this is how these people still live, and knowing more about how everybody else exists makes this so much worse now. And the conversation here because Mustang is sitting with him and he is just really having a hard time coping with his emotional response to seeing these people like celebrating and how he feels about her, but who she is and the way that, her status within this whole hierarchy. She looks at the mine and the can. Place is disgusting. I wrote a piece of legislation that the reformers plan to put through after all this. It'll put the Department of Energy, it'll gut the Department of Energy, restructure the Board of Quality Control, change the way this meat shop is run. You see, the supply stores in this place has food enough for 7 years, yet they keep maxing out their requisition orders. I took a look at their files, the mine magistrate skimming off the top, likely reselling the supplies on the black market. Lying copper thought we wouldn't notice, probably because some gold or silver told him they'd grease the right palms to make sure no one ever quibbled, all while he has a malnourished population. So it's like, she's caring enough about these people. It's promising. And she finally asks Darrow, Why are we here? And he says, this is the mine where the girl sang the forbidden song. And he holds his hand out and says, come with me. And that's the end of the chapter. And I assume that he's going to tell her what he really is. And it better go well or I'm going to be very upset. But I can't believe I had to stop here. Like, ugh. So next episode will be the last one for this book. And then we start the next one, which I'm just realizing I don't even remember the name of, but I have this Morning Star. Is there only 3 books? I can't remember if you guys have told me or not how many books there are. I feel like there were more than 3, but that's all that is in a spreadsheet right now. It may be that you guys have commissioned more and Candace just hasn't had an opportunity to update the spreadsheet, but so Cassie says 6. That's way more than I was expecting. Nice. I'm excited. I like the series so much that it would be kind of a bummer if there were only 3 books, you know? All right. So I am way over time. I have got to stop, but thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. I really hope y'all are enjoying the coverage and just appreciate y'all commissioning this so steadily. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'll see you guys soon. And until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.